Welcome to the HC Biz Show, the podcast dedicated to unraveling the business of healthcare. I'm Don Lee, joined by my co-host Shahid Shah. And Shahid, today we're going to be continuing this conversation. We're really just getting into the thick of it here. We've introduced the innovation, Lifecycle, Ontology, and in a nutshell, what we're trying to do is codify what we've learned in our careers, building things, deploying things in healthcare, and what we've learned from talking to 200 interviews over the last 5-6 years, doing all this stuff. And we're trying to package that together into something understandable, digestible, reusable, so that we can innovate more purposefully and repeatedly in healthcare. And where we're at in this whole journey is on the, how do you, once you've picked the things you're going to work on, how do you really set expectations early on? How do you decide, how do you decide what to work on? How do you set expectations around that? And how do you measure it over time? So we've got a fantastic guest in Brian Sanderson to talk about this here today. Before we bring him and introduce Brian, what else would you say to set context for where we're at on this discussion and where we're headed today?
Yeah, so as most of you have heard through our past conversations, there are multiple techniques towards attacking these markets of how do you introduce your product or service, whether the product or service happens to be a chiropractic service, a cardiology service, or a digital health front door tool. And that is, there are always two ways of thinking. Should I go patient first? Or if I don't go patient first, am I just relegating myself to what we traditionally, we don't call it this, but this is what everybody who does not go patient first ends up doing, and that is enterprise first. So typically enterprise first thinking says, regardless of what my patient can or cannot afford, what they can or cannot accommodate, what they do or don't care about, I need to see what can my nurses do, my doctors do, my administrators do, what can my medical records or HIM professionals do. And when you first look at your organization and then say, well, my HIMs can only do this with my doctors and my nurses and my NPs and my PAs and my CEO, that's very enterprise first thinking. It's like, regardless of what the patient wants or what they can afford, this is what I can do. And unfortunately, for decades, this is how healthcare is operated because it's never had any reason to be competitive with other industries who think consumer first, right? When you think Amazon, when you think Disney, when you think Marriott, of course, these guys, they're not enterprise first thinkers, right? They don't care. Marriott doesn't care what Hilton can or cannot do. They do what their consumers want. And when you look at that thinking, can you say that if we buy or build our own tools, our own services, are we capable of doing patient first thinking? And if so, the argument goes, like if every other industry is consumer first and we are not, we are suffering for that. The problem in every other industry is, for us, meaning our problem is that in every other industry, consumers have a direct line between what they want and desire to the product or service that they buy. And that direct line is just called demand. And so supply meets demand. You charge for what you want and they pay for what you want. In healthcare, we are in what we refer to as an intermediated business. What I want doesn't matter if my insurance won't pay for it. What I want doesn't matter if the doctor who I would like to choose is not in my network, and so on and so on and so on. So that's why I'm really excited to have Brian on today to really talk about this idea of patient first. And he's done a lot of writing and thinking around this and worked on a number of tools to say, is there really value in patient first thinking? Or are we, because we're in an intermediated market, relegated to this enterprise first thinking because we have no choice? So with that, Brian, tell us, who are you? What have you been working on in this patient first area? And take us to the promised land.
Wow, that's a fantastic introduction. And I am so engaged in everything you just said. Having been in the healthcare industry my entire professional career, I have a proclivity towards those organizations that will go out to the edge to meet where it is we either need to go or that's where the patients are. And being in consulting for so long, I've had the opportunity to see organizations that have the courage to do that, And I've seen organizations that don't do that and then suffer financially, market share in whatever way. So a little bit about my background. I did want to be a doctor coming out of school until I actually was in a doctor's office and I saw the things that they had to do, touch, see, treat, etc. I said, boy, that healthcare administration thing looks so much better, right? So I worked for what is now Adventist Midwest in Chicago, worked for Northwestern Memorial Hospital, loved every minute of both of those settings, and then, of course, went to business school, which produces consultants, right? And the upside about being in consulting is you get to see a lot of different organizations, see some very talented executives, see executives that are struggling, et cetera. And then having been involved in building out the practice at Crow, we have a tool that takes every single patient transaction every single day from over 1,600 hospitals, thousands of physicians. So Ascension themselves calls us the single source of truth for net revenue, because we can see all these trends. We saw the trends during the pandemic. We saw the trends afterwards. We see those that are operating well, those that aren't operating well, and we can quantify it. And the one thing that I've seen over time is those that appear to focus on patients. That is, they do the kinds of things you were talking about to make their environment focused on a patient, not just during the episode of care, but in the lifetime patient value and patient loyalty. Those capture more. Now, there's more referrals that patients see their doctors. When they need care, they come back there, and then when they talk to their neighbors and friends, they get more there. So whatever they're creating, I have attempted to quantify in my book called Patient First Revolution, but it's principally born out of what I've seen working and where I see the industry needing to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Brian, tell us a little bit about what are some easy to see differences between a patient-first thinking group versus an enterprise-first thinking group. Of course, we talked about a little bit if you're role-focused, like I can't handle this benefit to patients because I don't have those people. So that's one example. But what are some good examples you see from industry about patient-first being done properly?
Sure. Well, let me answer it two ways. It's a great question. So let me answer it two ways. The one is the basic premise. So if we can agree on a basic premise, then we can agree on some of the tactical elements. And I'll reference an article I recently wrote. So the basic premise is that people want to feel taken care of, right? So it seems strange that we would say in medicine, because we provide medical care, but it's more than just the episodic care that says fix my wound, fix my broken leg, fix my cold, or whatever it is. People want to be taken care of over the course of their lifetime medical journey. They want access to people that can help guide them through a very complex environment. You referenced the limitations of the intermediaries. You know, navigating insurance is a part of the the lifetime medical journey. Right? Navigating where you go into a health system to get to the right person is part of it. Navigating payment is part of it. Navigating recovery is part of it. It's not just on-prem services. So if we can agree that people want to be taken care of, like I do, from my mechanic, from my accountant, from my whatever, the same kind of treatment where I feel trust, then let's move on from there. Right? So what are some of the examples that at least I've put together to give you a sense as to where I'm headed? By the way, none of these are optimizing your DRG. None of these are optimizing your coding. None of these are optimizing episodic elements, but all of them will get you closer to the patient, and the closer to the patient you get, the more of their customer lifetime value you receive. And we could talk about quantifying that as well. Forgive me, I'm referencing my own notes here, but let me give you 5 quick examples of how this gets done. So stay with me and jump in if you'd like, but patient satisfaction and patient experience is measured a bunch of different ways. There is an academic medical center client that I have that measures it 8 different ways from 7 different departments. To me, that doesn't sort of coagulate into something, right? So develop your own hybrid scoring methodology, because if you don't measure it, right, you're not going to manage it. manage it.
Where would you recommend it? And I'll jump in, and Don will as well, to say, okay, can you give us maybe a reference or a URL, which of course will be in our show notes. So if you don't have it off the top of your heads, but if you have an ability to point us to one and say, hey, this is a good one for small doctor's offices or medium-sized hospitals, because not everybody is an academic medical center. Not everybody is a large hospital. Almost everybody else sits in the middle or on the low end. So if you have some immediate references, you can mention that, or we'll include that into the show notes later.
Sure, sure. So, I'm going to give you the typical consultant answer. It depends, right?
Yep.
So for this particular academic medical center, they had access to all of these. Others don't have access to things, but HCAHPS, Press Ganey, referral retention rates, the kinds of things that are synergistic with your strategy. I think those are the important things. But, if you look at referral retention rates. Over 50% of the referrals that most health systems or most physician offices give do not get executed for a variety of reasons. It could be some of the intermediary, but most of the time, there's no real connectivity back to the patient to ensure that it occurs, right? And the other is some of them go off to other health systems, et cetera. So that to me is an important element to see. Are you really connecting with patients, right? You could look at readmission rates, you could look at other kinds of things, but the patient experience and patient satisfaction is an aggregate of a bunch of different things. I say start with something you're comfortable with where you have information rather than try to go to Shangri-La, because most organizations do some parts of it, but they're so diffuse that it doesn't mean anything.
Sure.
That'd be my first one. The second one is to inventory the digital communication vehicles that you have, and then sync them around the generations, right? So Gen Xers, millennials, Gen Zs, et cetera. If you look at any retail establishment, they will focus their communication into modes that best suit particular target segments. Even if you went Medicare and non-Medicare, right? I can tell you the communication vehicles for these people are different. They're different from my 80-year-old parents, they're different from my 20-something-year-old kids, and they're different from me. We look at it differently. Just the communication vehicle will create more engagement. And the more engagement you have, the more attention you have, as we discussed previously, the more opportunity you have to help with their lifetime medical journey.
I
I'll go
love it.
through these
And by the
quick.
way, Brian, quick question there is that if we were to look at another non-healthcare industry, should we look at retail shopping? Should we look at logistics? Who can we say, while not intermediated, while not 100% identical, lean towards how? I'm just making an example up, and you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But lean towards how Target or Walmart talk to their customers, or how CVS talks to its customers. Who would that be that you'd recommend?
Yeah, the reference I use most frequently, it's a great question, but the reference I use most frequently is retail because everybody experiences it. By the way, everybody experiences healthcare, right? So if we keep going to this consumer driven, so the Healthcare Financial Management Association 10 years ago was saying we're going to consumer driven, but the consumers didn't really have any tools, they didn't have any knowledge. It's almost like you walking up to a mall that you've never been to, and then someone says, okay, you're in charge now, go shop. Well, where do I go? What do I need, et cetera? Same with healthcare. It is very complex, even for the people like us that we know, that know it fairly well. So I tend to use retail because the retail establishments use data, use a variety of different mechanisms of communication, and have the opportunity to do an experience with them on the floor or on the website where you buy, where they could improve it and create more loyalty. So I think that's the direction that I would say.
Fair enough. No, that's perfect. And in fact, you gave us two pieces of advice. One was try not to go to Shangri-La. And if you're not going to Shangri-La and you know what Target is doing or Walmart is doing, just do that until you have enough knowledge to do something other than what they're doing.
Right. I'm sure all of us have had experiences going into a particular place and feeling the customer focus that they have there. And then when you've gone into other places, you haven't felt it, et cetera. I'm not suggesting that hospitals don't have that, but if you really focus on caring for the customer. By care, it's not just the medical care. It's what's going on around them. What do they need? What do they need after? What do they need in front of the next episode that they might have? If you give them a feeling that they'll take care, that they're taken care of, they will come back to you. So in Chicago, where I'm based, it's unique because when we start talking about the health plans and selection of networks, et cetera, it's one of the few cities where people will select their hospital before they select their doctor. That is, in other cities, they may say, oh, my doctor's here, I have to select the health plan associated with it. To me, that means that hospitals, at least in Chicago, have the opportunity to capture market share, attention, loyalty, whatever you call it, by serving them in this manner and continuing that loyalty strain in whatever ways most effective. But for communication anyway, making sure that you communicate in a way that focuses on what it is that they would be most receptive to. I'm going to stay in the vein of communications a little bit here, but there's a thing now with notifications, which you can get through retail, which you can get through a lot of online retail, which you can get through other means, et cetera. But there are so many different kinds and types of notifications that occur within healthcare right now. There's appointment notifications, there's test result notifications, there's revenue notifications, you owe this, et cetera, most of which are disconnected, in which case you're getting a bunch of different things so they turn into noise, right? So my suggestion is merge this into one data communication vehicle. I know all of us, when we get something from a particular place that means something, it will get our attention. When it's diffuse, et cetera, it won't get our attention. So again, another way to engage or attach that patient to your hospital.
Yeah, one quick question, Don. You've got young kids. Is anybody in your neck of the woods doing what Brian is saying? Because I feel like the problem with doing that is you go to your pediatrician, for example, they're using EHRX with practice management system Y with front door system Z, and none of these are hooked up. So where would a group of practices be able to even do some of the unification that they're saying? So Don, do you see any unification possibilities here? And are there tools that you can think of that maybe that our audience can learn from and use?
I'd say outside of the typical mechanisms like an IPA, a physician alliance or an ACO type arrangements like that, which my pediatrician is part of, and that's connected to one of the larger health systems here, just that kind of standard healthcare system tooling that way or teaming that way. And it tends to be, there's two big systems here and you're either part of one or part of the other, and you kind of team up with them. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily what Brian's talking about here, but maybe could at least lay the groundwork for being able to start doing some of that stuff.
Yeah, and when we think about, and we've talked about the innovation lifecycle, and innovation lifecycles begin with expectations. Like, don't try to pick a tool unless you've laid out your expectations. Brian has just given us 10 minutes of fantastic ways of measuring, laying out strategies, etc. Like, for example, if somebody is offering you a tool and it does not know the difference between a 45-year-old and a 40-year-old and a 22-year-old, we've got a problem in the tool. They can't bullshit their way around the idea that they don't know what the customer is. If, for example, you are being offered a tool which says, oh, we're going to increase your referrals. Awesome. How do I know that the referral was actually produced and then accepted by the customer, and then they actually went to where the referral was supposed to go? So all of these things have really, really important. So as Brian mentions what he's mentioning, mentally think about and say, well, the last time I got an evaluation from a demo of a tool or a service provider, oh yeah, they talked about each one of these things and they showed how a tool could handle this. Because we can say all we want, but if your tool in the demo that you watch through the expectations that you set doesn't handle what Brian is saying, it's just an idea that'll sound really good, but you can't actually implement it.
Boy, that's so well said. So well said. So here's where I think it's going. There are portals now, patient portals, that I'm seeing are evolving. Right. So the one that I'm in, I can get my test results. I can pay there, et cetera. It doesn't do much pushing right now, but so many other academic and large health systems have these portals, and to a system, they all complain about the lack of engagement with it. and it doesn't connect with the patient. Patients get pushed to it, right? The idea is to pull patients into it, where it's a source of knowledge, it's a source of getting their questions answered, it's a source of things such as that. Where I think it's actually headed, I think it's headed into a command center environment. So there needs to be some kind of overlay of a command center that combines diagnostic information, EMR-oriented information, with revenue-oriented information, with demographic information, plus the tools to be able to use this to most effectively communicate with you, or with a patient, et cetera. And that patient could be, they only come in once a year for their annual physical. It could be what's happening with you with your post-discharge, and it could be using wearable information to help monitor conditions, to help monitor movement, to help monitor dietary, et cetera. I think a command center is in the future. I think that future is less than 5 years away, but those that build it first will capture more market attention, and I think capture more customer lifetime value.
In that context, and thinking back to the premise of our discussion here, is how do we pick something to work on and then set expectations around it and measurements around it? And I want to think about what you just described there from that standpoint. Because presumably, if someone's listening, they don't have that yet, right? Because almost nobody does, or nobody does, depending on how you look at it. So if someone says, all right, how would I start to prioritize something like that? And what would my expectations be? The first thing I kind of want to go back to is earlier in the conversation when you said, we're not talking about optimizing DRGs, we're not talking about optimizing coding, et cetera. Is it safe to assume that we also have to do that stuff, though? Or we're saying we don't want to just focus on doing those things, but we kind of have to have that operational goodness in place in order to do these things too, do we not? Or do you see it a different way?
Yeah, we do. The mindset that I'm hearing from organizations that are struggling the most is a very 3-month mindset, right? So they use it for profit a lot. You have these quarterly numbers you have to hit, et cetera. And so when you go to the quick answers, like improve the DRGs, improve the capture rate of outpatient ancillary procedures, improve the coding, to me it smells more like I need money quick, right? And you should be excellent at that. I'm not saying you shouldn't be. You should be excellent at that, but it doesn't stop there.
Right. That was my suspicion.
You could get Don's family into your organization and optimize the heck out of whatever it is that he gets done. And if he has a bad experience and if he doesn't feel loyal to you, Don will go to that other health system and he'll give them his customer, what's left of his customer lifetime value, right? So you did the short-term stuff. It's the long-term stuff that we're talking about that has the most amount of value. And I do think that there are platforms right now that you could engage this. And there are organizations that I know of who are being selective as to where they go after it, going after chronic conditions such as diabetes, going after cardiac care, rehab, and implementing the communication, the tracking, all those kinds of things in a quasi command center or platform that has worked for that patient population.
By the way, if you want to drop some names, Brian, please do. Names of companies you might like, folks that you think in the industry might be doing this well.
Sure. Well, one of the first organizations in Chicago to take a chronic illness focus was Advocate. It's Advocate Aurora now, and I complimented them at the time because they recognized that it was a distinct group of people that needed distinct type of follow-up and care and communication and access, such that they could make a difference in their care. Throw them in with the rest of everyone else, and you wouldn't serve their medical needs appropriately, right? So just the segment of that population, I think, is an advancement. And then there are other organizations like Texas Health Resources that are really trying to build out data and infrastructure, et cetera, to focus on particular tracks or use cases where they feel as if they make a difference in the patient experience, they can engage the patient more in their ongoing care and recovery versus leaving, good luck, call us if or come back to the ER. They're really engaging with them. So I think a couple places have shown examples. I just think we can really blow that up into something that is tremendous.
Yeah, and
Nice.
to entrepreneurs listening here, what we tend to give is advice that doesn't require them to think for 6 months, like removing the "it depends" from our
Yes.
consultancy speak, as it were. And so we can say two things with pretty nice accuracy that we can easily defend, and that is, instead of looking at acute care, look at chronic care, right? If you've got a tool, you got a technology, you got a service, whatever, focus on chronic. Chronic, for example, in cardio, chronic, for example, for diabetes or endocrine, chronic for pick whatever your specialty happens to be, but go for chronic, not acute first. Second is start with chronic with those that might be in Medicare versus commercial. And this is where, Brian, I'd love for you to say, out of the 1,600 or so hospitals you have in your system, would you say that entrepreneurs who are building these tools might find it easier to head into, say, chronic care-ish in Medicare, or commercial would be better for them? Just as a super opinionated, you don't know the customer or the startup, but you're giving your viewpoint based on your experience.
Yeah, great question. Either way works. One would be easier to administer, the Medicare, and in fact, there are Medicare ACOs and those kinds of things where there's already organization and some platforming. It's a case. The commercial side would probably be more profitable. It may be a bit more transient, but what I do think is that patients on the commercial side are making benefit decisions, particularly as we migrate to more out of pocket, et cetera. They're making more of these decisions, and they're making it based upon what best fits them, their family, their lifestyle, their comfort, their trust, and things such as that. So either way is fine. I actually think that on the commercial side, you have more longevity because you tend to have a family structure that can pull both pediatrics, chronic, injuries, and evolution of babies and things such as that. So I like the commercial side of it. If you want to default to Medicare, that's fine if you already have that infrastructure.
Yeah, and the way to think about that might be that if what you are trying to do is do fast entry into an area that is better known, well understood, and you want to get quick success, start with Medicare. But I love what you said about the fact that commercial gives you more upsell. We'll just use the regular finance technology terminology rather than healthcare terminology. But if you go to Medicare, your upsells are a lot harder. Expansion in markets in healthcare a little bit. Medicare are harder. So it sounds like what you're saying is go chronic as your entry point, but if you want fast reaction, go Medicare. But if you want expansion capabilities after you win a client, commercial seems a little bit better. Is that a good summary?
That's well said. The issue is any of those that you go in, if you can set forth a platform. Most of the CFOs that I talk to, I talk to them about a patient management organization, which is the subject of this book. This command center, multidisciplinary environment where the focus is on the lifetime medical journey, not on the episode of care, et cetera. It's overwhelming. It is. I mean, there's all the tools are in place. I would argue that the empathy is also in place. But it seems like it's so much to digest, which is why chronic or a target segment or this. You could even do it with a particular payer, although I would argue that you could get crossways and you start counting dollars and things such as that. But the idea is to start, right? And some organizations have, some don't know where to, but those are good examples.
Don, go ahead and pick up from this thread the idea of the expectations now and say, what would we actually put down on a sheet of paper? Let's just do a quick
Yeah,
exercise.
that's exactly where I was
Yeah,
going.
go for it,
Yep.
Don.
And yeah, the last like 10 minutes or so here, if you think of an organization that hasn't started yet, and I don't know, I'm sitting in Buffalo, so let's pick a mid-sized American city metropolitan area that's got two health systems. And what would you recommend they start thinking about, and how do they start drafting expectations around that the organization could rally around when it comes to this type of thinking? What's the ground zero entry point to start heading down this path that might get me there in 5 years?
You bet. So three paths. Let's start with this way. One is that you need to sell it internally that we're taking care of patients for their lifetime medical journey. All right. So let's start measuring customer lifetime value or patient lifetime value. right? Now, if you break that into the segments that we discussed previously, like chronic and whatever, those lifetime values really increase. But generally, we're talking about a net revenue patient lifetime value of about $500,000 per human being, right? If you just look at it actuarially. Now, the issue is many don't receive care, many die early, and things such as that. But when you start getting into chronic care, then that number escalates.
So,
But
Brian, where did you
getting
get that 500,000 from? That you're making a guess, or out of your hospitals? Industry-wide figure. Where does that 500,000
Yeah,
FMV
it's an
come from?
actuarial calculation of usage rates and the type of usage that they would have. So X number of inpatient visits per lifetime, X number of outpatient visits. We know what the average inpatient net revenue is. We know what the average outpatient net revenue is, and then you do the math
Got it.
from there. But the issue is that it's not so much the people that don't use the hospital; it's the ones that do use it. And so you start with just the basic premise that we're in this for the lifetime medical journey, not just the episodes of care that occur while they are on prem. People want information, they want direction, they want empathy, etc. What I've told physicians, you want to fill your schedule. All you need to do is call the patient and say it's time for your whatever. Do you think they would
Yeah.
say no, right?
Yeah.
But and in fact, I would argue that they'd probably say thank you, right?
Yeah.
If I took my car into my mechanic, he said, "Brian, you haven't come in for your oil change," and my first thought was, "Well, you should have called me then, right?" But anyways, having the lifetime medical journey as a starting point.
All right, and you're looking at this not just from a this is the right thing to do standpoint, which it is. We could all agree on that. But that's not just it. You're saying it's the right thing to do, and it's the right financial thing to do. There is a ton of upside to the business to going down this path. And I think it's important to make sure that we're telling both sides of that story. I think sometimes people get stuck on we should do this because this is why we're all in healthcare and this is the right thing to do. And we always say there's no business model for doing the right thing. And you got to have both pieces. And that's what you're talking about here. So I want to make sure that's clear to the listener.
I'm saying exactly that. But
Yep.
I do want to reference something that Shade said earlier, which is you have different departments focused on different things, and they are focused on their things. What we need to talk about, the reason I'm saying you start with this overall mantra, strategy, vision, whatever it is that this is a multidisciplinary approach to this. It includes managed care, it includes revenue cycle, it includes operations, it includes technology, right? It includes marketing, it includes all the operational elements, et cetera, that are focused on one thing, and that is ensuring that we give the right care at the right time, at the right place, and in the right environment where people feel trusted and taken care of. If you feel as though, or if your patients feel as though you will take care of them, then you will have their loyalty. And people say, oh, it's a doctor thing. No, it's an interaction thing. Do either of you guys know anybody at Amazon?
Me and
I
Jeff go way
trust
back.
that when I have an interaction at Amazon, it goes the way I expected it, and I have a good service, right?
Yeah.
It's just, right? So don't tell me it's a person specific thing. I think it's a health systems specific thing.
Right on.
The second part of it is to create the measurements that the baseline measurements that will get you to monitor it over time. So I think it's patient experience rates. We talked about this before. Engagement rates, whether it be in marketing or retail or email, they have click rates, they have click throughs, they have open rates, they have all these kinds of things. To the degree that you can establish the baseline of how patients engage with you and how satisfied their experience and how they feel about it, aggregate those into a report card of some type. And you had asked the question earlier, do I have a preference? Yes, I have a preference as to how to build that up, but I don't want you as an organization to go out and have to buy all these things. Tell me what you have. Let's build something that's syncs with your strategy, and then let's build from there. Mm-hmm. I would argue that coming back for appointments, not coming in for readmissions, right? Open rates, engagement rates, schedules filled, though all of those would be satisfactory measures for that. And then the last thing I would start talking about is if you want to get it truly financial, is start looking at the kind of patient lifetime value or customer lifetime value that you're having at current. Because if you're having patients that are coming in to you to see a doctor, or they may get some kind of ancillary procedure, but they're spending their revenue dollars at other health systems or to receive other kinds of care, et cetera, you're missing an opportunity to create loyalty. And by the way, loyalty and synergy probably equals better care, right? If you consistently go into the place where your medical information is housed and there's consistently comfort and a consistent set of doctors treat them, then I would argue that over the long run, you would get better care overall. So it's not just a revenue play, it's a consistency play, it's a comfort play, it's a trust play, and things such as that. So I'd say, those kinds of things are a place to start in Buffalo.
Got it.
And there's
And
simple
now,
ways to do that.
as an organization, like, you're playing the long game here now, right? Like we said, operational excellence, that's table stakes. Of course, you got to do your DIGs right and your coding right, and you've got to do your job effectively and efficiently. So yes, go do all of that stuff. But that's just a given. You have to do that. This is if you want to take that next strategic step forward, you want to differentiate yourself from your competition, this is the way that you need to be thinking. That's the argument you're making here. You need to look long-term. How is this going to impact lifetime value of my patients, my customers, and everything else? How does an organization kind of pair that long-term thinking and long-term measurement with some kind of intermediate successes so that they can make sure they're on the right track? And it's not always just trying to convince everybody at the organization it's going to be good someday. Just keep down this path. Like, what do you do in those interim steps to prove it? Like, look at our patient satisfaction went up, our HCAHPS went up, or this. Are there some kind of intermediate measures that you think are effective in that regard?
Yeah, well, let me answer it two ways, because I'll give you an operational, a fairly easy operational element that I think would satisfy a lot of these things. And then from that, you can measure it. Right?
Okay.
So here's my idea. Start a membership program. So we'll take care of you, whatever that membership program is. And when I was at Northwestern Hospital many moons ago, we started this thing. It was sort of a membership program. All you really got was a card. And you participate in this thing, you got this card with your name on it. It had no swipe, nothing. We got so many complaints from our registration people that people are showing up with these cards all the time. Right? And they didn't know what to do with them. So clearly there was something, right? Something that attached the neighborhood patients with our hospital as simple as a card. So, but if you start with a membership program, right, you can have a higher level program that you charge for, you just do it for free. And some of those benefits are connectivity, education, whatever it is, whatever that is. Then you would have a group of patients that would flash the card when they show up, feel good about being a member of whatever, and then you can have their information to monitor what have you seen historically in terms of patient revenue, what are you seeing prospectively, see what kind of utilization you're seeing there. Plus, when you start talking about a membership program, you need to organize some kind of platform to get people to around the organization, operationally, financially, et cetera, to buy into it. So just by starting a program, that's not a bad place to go to attach your patients to create some kind of stickiness that you can use that information for various purposes.
Yeah, and that's, by the way, a fantastic immediate idea. And just as a reminder to the listeners, nothing that Brian said is illegal, right? You don't have to say there's a HIPAA problem with it. There's some Stark law problem. Get off the bullshit about how all of this stuff is illegal. None of this is illegal. It's all valuable. Everyone does it, and you have to do it in terms of the bounds of legality, right? So nobody should be writing Brian saying he's asking them to track patients for all of their life. No, we're saying that just like you know who they are by scanning their credit card, you could attach a credit card to a membership ID. That doesn't mean it's a global ID that you're going to be tracking forever. And there's nothing there's no HIPAA problem here, there's no security issue, then there's no Stark Law or any other problems before all the lawyers get up in arm.
Yeah, always
Well,
nice to
well said.
dispense with the FUD.
Yeah.
So yeah, right on. So and what we heard here too in that kind of summary of like what would be the steps for for that mid-sized hospital was basically get your story straight within the organization, right? Like make sure all of these various departments understand how this is going to impact their work and make things better for them over time. Once you have that, the next thing was measures. Right. How are you going to keep track of this thing over time? And then I'm failing at my third point here. Help me out, Brian. Your third point. I'm killing my summary of
Was to put it financially.
how are
Just
you
to
going to
put
pay
it
for it?
financially.
Right.
So
Thank you. Sorry.
you
I
want
was
to
on a
measure
roll for a
experience,
second.
but
I
put it
lost it.
financially. It's kind of
So
important, at least with my CFO audience.
Yeah.
yeah,
So
right
if I
on.
was in
No, so
Buffalo, if I
go
was
for
in
it.
Buffalo, Don, first thing, especially in a 2 or 3 system town, I would do this kind of thing immediately to differentiate myself, because market share and brand recognition and things such as that, getting some kind of loyalty to your organization and expanding it, I think is one of the most valuable things. I just hear so many health systems that are negotiating with managed care companies, compromising their rates because they need, quote, volume, and this is the only way to do it. I say flip it, right? Make the patients want to come to you because you have something that they really want and they feel as though you will take care of them.
Yeah.
You do that and you will
Yeah.
get them.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
another thing
Right on.
there's a little bit more bullshit to dispense with, and that is, well, Brian, all my patients won't do it. Well, of course they won't. All you need is 3% or 5% or 10% to increase your revenue. So a lot of the naysayers and the objections will immediately come in. Well, not all of my patients can afford a membership program. Well, give some of them away for free, for God's sakes. Just
Yeah.
charge the ones who can afford it a lot more. And, then you can have a lot of, you can say, all right, the local grocery store donated 100 memberships to whoever does grocery shopping in that area, right? There's all kinds of ways of doing this. It's just that, and sometimes I feel like in healthcare, we don't like to use our imaginations. Everyone else can use their imaginations, but we think things are icky or illegal or might be a HIPAA privacy problem. No, none of this is there. All you have to do is what Brian is saying, and that is think about the patient before you think about yourself. And this is what happens in most meetings. You spend in a 60-minute meeting, we'll waste the first 15 minutes educating ourselves with what happened last week, right? But then the next 45 or so minutes we will spend talking about why it's so hard for us to do something, instead of talking about the 900 reasons why it's good for the patient to
Yeah,
get
right on.
something, and then adjust all of our topics so that anybody's giving a reason about why something is not possible is not invited to an innovation meeting.
Yep. Just
They're
not
not
allowed.
there. Their
I
job
love
is
it.
Love
to
it.
find out why it works.
Love it.
All right. So then I'll try my summary one more time to tie it back to this ongoing innovation lifecycle ontology discussion is get everybody on the same page organizationally, figure out how you're going to measure it, figure out how you're going to pay for it, and then go. And I do think like those 3 steps are going to be critical to any successful innovation in healthcare or otherwise. So I think that's a great way to summarize it. And Brian, on the way out here, I'm going to pull up briansanderson.me, which is where folks can go to learn more about your book and you, and there's videos, and there's a way down here for them to grab a free chapter, download 5 free pages right here. So I just want to share that with the audience. And then anything else that you would want to share, anywhere else you'd want people to connect with you online, etc.
Go to briansanderson.me. That gets them there. Where I'm seeing this industry going is in a direction that I really like relative to ensuring that patients get the attention for the kinds of things, knowledge, access, communication that they really need. It's just not happening fast enough for our health systems to move because they're so concerned about all these other things related to pandemic, et cetera. The reality is all the tools are already there. So when I build out what this thing looks like, there are some digital tools that are available in the marketplace that can all snap in to make this thing happen relatively quickly. I think our industry needs it for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is revenue. but also for the connectivity to the patients. Just throwing them out there to say, you guys figure it out, is not the answer. And that's part of the reason we're in the economic situation that we're in. So this is I personally think this is the direction that we need to go as an industry. And every piece of information, whether it be revenue wise, engagement wise, or utilization wise, seems to support that this is the direction.
Right on. I appreciate you coming to share the message, and keep doing the good work, putting the books out there, and trying to convince all your CFO friends to do the right thing. So we appreciate you. Thanks for the time.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
You bet. Really enjoyed it.
All right.
Thanks,
And to
gentlemen.
the listener, you can check us out at thehcbiz.com. We'll see you next time.